Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk Radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk Radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. Well, welcome again and happy Independence Day. Glad that you could be with us. We're going to be having a bunch of fun today talking about, well, this and that, and guns and independence and freedom and what it all means and how it links together. And is it still relevant today? Or do you even know how we got to this place, how we actually started this great experiment in representative government? Yeah, I mean, quite simply, we started this because they came to take our guns and our ammunition. They took the powder. And we said, no, F that. We're not doing that. And that led us to where we are today. There's a lot of dots that connect along the way, but the connection is still strong. The Second Amendment. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. Oh, by the way, I'm Tom Gresham. Show us Gun Talk. Glad you could be with us. By the way, if you want to join us at any point, it's a really easy task. Just give me a call, 866-TALK-GUN, or Tom, that's me, Tom Talk Gun will get you in here. It is, in fact, Independence Day. Yes, of course, it's the 4th of July, but I kind of like describing it as Independence Day because it helps us remember exactly what it's all about. 245 years ago, we declared our independence from the British, which was a treasonable offense. It was, actually, it's fatal. They could kill you for that. And they did, some of the folks. And they did. And we ended up fighting a brutal, brutal war of independence. Revolutionary war. But it was kicked off because, I mean, certainly there were a lot of things that happened getting us there, but the precipitous event was when they came to take our guns, gun control. If that sounds familiar, it should, because there are still people in government who want to take your guns away. They want more gun control. They want to make us subservient to them. They want to make us dependent upon them for our safety. And when somebody can make you dependent upon them for your safety, which means for your life, they have all the control and you have none, aka slavery. Joining me to talk about this and a whole lot of other things about where we are with gun control in the country and what's going on in that crazy state of California, Gene Hoffman joins me from Cal Gun Rights, also Second Amendment Foundation. How you doing, Gene? Happy Independence Day.
I'm well, Tom. Happy 4th of July to you too, sir.
Absolutely. You know, it's just one of those days that sometimes we need to connect those dots all the way back to how we got here and what actually started this country. And it really was the colonists saying, okay, that's too far. You're not going to disarm us, right?
Well, look, it's really funny, the current president saying that, cannon weren't protected. It's like, what was going on the day the first shots were fired? Exactly. Was there cannon involved? I have this sense that, cannon were involved.
Well, yeah, Joe Biden just says, oh, and didn't you love, he says, well, when the Second Amendment was written, from the time it was written, it said that we could keep certain people from having guns. No, it didn't. That would have been anathema to the very idea. And to say, well, you could never own a cannon. Not only could you own a cannon then, you could own a warship that was full of cannons. And, oh, yeah, by the way, you can still own a cannon. It's perfectly legal.
Letters of marque are still right there in the Constitution. And the only way you can have a letter of marque is to have an actually fully armed naval-capable vessel. Cannon inside, just saying.
Right. You have a warship full of cannons, and you get a letter of marque to go out and wage war as a privateer, for the government. So, yeah, that's all still in there. I think it's important to do all that. And then I'm looking at what just happened in San Jose, where the city council says, oh, yeah, gun owners, you're going to have to pay for the violence that you're not doing. And you'll also have to get liability insurance, which my first thought is, who's going to write that? Probably nobody.
Yep.
What's going on?
There's a lot of politics on there. They haven't actually passed anything. It's the funniest part. So the moment they pass something, we will go take care of it. But, look, it's this classic conceit that somehow there should be liability insurance for firearms ownership. And it's like, okay, do we get credit for all of the defensive gun uses or not? And of course, the answer is no, because the defensive gun uses are a net positive for society.
Right.
But But
so
it's California.
they only look at the negative sides, and they're not going to go to the people who are actually committing crimes and say, you guys need to pay for your crimes and pay the victims. We're going to go to this group over here that had nothing to do with your criminal activity, and we're going to get them to pay money. On the one hand, you're tempted to say, well, it makes no sense, but actually it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. It's a British view, right? Like, do not pick on the people who can actually pick back. Let's pick on everybody else. They're much easier to deal with.
Well,
because if you actually went and dealt with the criminals in San Jose, well, gee, the cops would have to do real work. Like, real work is not something that most people want a government.
Well, you'd have to deal with them. Or if you said, let's take care of the societal problems that are causing this, that would be very difficult and very time-consuming and take a lot of years. And, that means we would actually have to identify those people, and they may end up being in groups that we're not allowed to identify these days, like gangs. If you just said, okay, what percentage of violent crime comes from gang warfare? It would be very high.
Very, very high. Something more than 60%. The one thing California might get right, even to its own accidental effort, is that decriminalizing drugs takes a little while, but tends to actually remove a lot of the unsanctioned violence. And it's funny, if you think about the history of this since the Revolutionary War, most every time we've had gun control, it's been because we've been trying to prohibit some substance. First it was in the 20s, now it's the drug war as we know it, and look, if you have a lucrative business and the only way you can defend it is by not calling the police, well, it's not surprising that gun violence is what you get.
Absolutely, and decriminalizing drug use does reduce crime because now you don't have the turf wars between groups that are basically, it's just a business engagement, but it's done with guns. Clearly, and then it's interesting you say that, though. I had not put that together, that gun control historically has been linked to the control of some substance all the way.
Yes.
Well, I think about... What's that?
So the Constitution is that when the Fourth Amendment was written, there wasn't such a thing as, items that were prohibited. And so, you might get a warrant to find, Mr. Smith's cow at Mr. Brown's house. Mm-hmm. But having a cow at your house was expected. There was no thing or substance or item that you didn't have at your house, 1790. Right? And so the Fourth Amendment doesn't ever really consider that people might have, by nature, things that were supposedly illegal, like a rifle that was too short or a substance that you're not supposed to have. Like, that was not a concept around 4th of July back in the day.
Well, and the very idea that you could have a stock for a rifle, just a piece of a rifle that could end up sending you to federal prison, would have been like the silliest thing in the world to propose back then.
Exactly. Yeah, the idea was that, of course, you had a firearm. You made it or you bought it at a local harbor, and it was just the thing that everyone had.
It's interesting you mentioned that back then, all guns were handmade or homemade. You may have bought it from an individual, but that person made it. There were no gun factories. And so the very idea that people say, well, you can't have guns that you've made yourself. You've always been able to have guns you made yourself. And we're talking now about, what they laughingly call ghost guns. I mean, homemade guns is what we're talking about. But that was actually what the Second Amendment was written about, was homemade guns.
That's totally correct. I mean, at most, maybe you bought a firing action at Boston Harbor. But even there, you knew your regional gunsmith who was really good at building things. You maybe got parts from him, but you generally built them yourself. And these were actual interesting projects that were critical to feeding yourself, feeding the family, keeping yourself safe from bears and mountain lions and all of the things that actually predate out there.
Right, and the hostiles, as they would call them, Indians at the time, and Native Americans, I mean, that was part of the deal as well. It's anybody who looks at history and doesn't understand that is simply turning a blind eye or frankly just lying.
Well, they have an agenda. The agenda is that, these things are bad, and they've assumed they're bad, and they never really think through how their armed guards and their police protect them exactly. Never get the fact that, technology works for everybody or works against everybody. But, ignoring the whole power trip and the desire to disarm the not white, not rich people, well, makes some sense, I guess.
Yep, exactly. If you've been following this at all, you hear the comments these days about, well, when they wrote the Second Amendment, they never imagined ... and then fill in with AR-15s or, whatever the technology is today. Of course, ignoring the fact that there were, in fact, semi-automatic firearms at the time. There were guns that would hold and shoot, more than 20 rounds at a time. Look up Puckle gun if you want to take a look at that. We're talking with Gene Hoffman, and Gene, you're kind of one of the guys that looks at this, I don't know, from a 40,000-foot view and, kind of look at where we are. What's going on with the advance of technology, whether it's, 3D printed guns and everything else, and the desire to basically stop the development of technology?
Well, it's a sad situation that people are so afraid of firearms as a technology that they're willing to violate the First Amendment too. So 3D printed guns, the blueprints, the underlying software that explain how to do this. We've literally got states trying to ban the publication of blueprints. I mean, it's like, might as well be publication of a Bible. It's the same thing. It is at worst, it's a recipe, and recipes are protected constitutionally just like any other First Amendment activity. And fundamentally, though, it puts a lie to the entire process. It is that, look, everyone is going to have the technology available on their desk to be able to create a firearm, a very functional firearm. The 3D printed gun movement is no longer about, the original kind of Cody Wilson liberator, even though that's the, touch point that we litigate about.
Right.
The reality is that people are making really good, functional, frankly, small machine guns, handguns, rifles out of this technology. And they're even making their own barrels, and they're making their own ammunition. It's down to, primers are like the last interesting thing you can't just super easily get on.
So, but what's happened is the move is, and I want people to understand what you said, some of these laws that are being proposed and have been passed, and some of the action by the government is to say you can't publish certain words or certain data. Is to shut down the publication or the sharing of files on the internet. And if you can do that, you can actually stop the publication of anything, couldn't you?
That's correct. I mean, if you can't have a recipe for that, then why can you have a recipe for Democratic speech or Republican speech? Those things are dangerous. We should stop those too.
Well, of course, there are people who would like to do that. Twitter, Facebook, so they want to stop that. Of course, I always like to share with people the idea that anything you would like to do to us, I want you to consider what it would be like if and when we end up with the majority, overwhelming majority, and we decide to do the exact same thing to you, and they don't seem to be able to go there in their minds.
Yeah. The Bill of Rights is really an interesting kind of non-aggression pact. It is, I can't do that to you, you can't do that to me, therefore let's leave it alone. And I think a lot of people miss that part of it, be it religion, be it speech, be it the right to self-defense, be it the right to be left alone at home. None of these things are, projecting force on others. But it is saying if you attempt to project force on others, then the Bill of Rights either keeps you from having to deal with it or gives you the teeth to push back.
It's interesting you call it a non-aggression pact. It is very much a you don't get to mess with me to interfere with what I'm doing. And as part of the bargain, I agree not to try to interfere with what you're doing. Because if one can do it, then the other can do it.
That's right. Everybody likes the first part. Nobody likes the second part.
Exactly right. Well, for those who say, well, the Second Amendment is outdated and has no application today, how do you respond?
So tell me the country that's fully disarmed everyone, and we'll talk. And the answer is never. It's never happened. I mean, the issue about gun control is who gets the guns. It's not whether there are guns out there. It's who gets them. And since the 4th, in America has been, okay, which people are we disarming? Is it the African Americans? Is it the Native Americans? Is it the people who were British sympathizers? These are the people who got disarmed. And, it troubles me that supposedly progressive folks will basically take laws that were created to keep African Americans and Chinese and Latinos from owning firearms and push real hard to apply them to everybody. Like, is that progressive? I guess they think it is.
I don't know that they either have accepted that reality, and that is the reality, that is the history, or if they just completely turn a blind eye. It's very much like today I saw on TV, they're talking about, a list of America's greatest presidents, and number 3 was FDR. And I'm thinking, really? The president who sent more than 100,000 American citizens into internment camps in the U.S., and this is one of the presidents you want to list as one of the best? It's just like, we're just going to pretend this history didn't happen.
Well, you're right, and that is the really painful one. But the funniest one is everybody who complains about American health care. It's like you can point directly at FDR. He's the one that caused you to have a very strange health care system. Good luck.
Yep, no, exactly. So tell me what you're doing these days. Which fights are top of mind for you?
Well, so, we're really excited that we proved to a federal judge that California's assault-weapons ban is totally unconstitutional. As usual, the Ninth Circuit has decided to ignore the Constitution here. This is kind of the usual. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting. If you look closely at our assault-weapons ban case, the stay would have expired today. Mm. And that tells you that the federal judge understands.
So, all right, so the judge has ruled in California that the assault weapons ban in California is unconstitutional. The Ninth Circuit says we're going to take that, and in the meantime, we're going to say you can't enforce it. You're not going to. The law's still in place, basically, is what they're saying.
They stayed it further, but he set it up to have a stay that would have expired on the 4th of July.
But one of the secret deals that people are not talking about is the way that the Ninth has put its stay in is actually contingent upon another case, which is not this case at all, right?
That's right. The Ninth Circuit looks to do anything it can to stall these things. And, it reflects on the last Supreme Court session, the Ninth Circuit was 15-1 the wrong direction in the cases that the Supreme Court reviewed against the Ninth Circuit. So the Ninth Circuit was upheld. So in 16 cases, they were overturned in all 15.
Wow. Okay. So in this case, I mean, realistically, this case was set up to go to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court.
That's right.
All along. We knew that's where it's going to go, right?
That's correct. And, we went and did the hard work. We got real evidence. We got real people around the world. We, got the general of the Kentucky National Guard to testify about the usefulness of AR-15s and how it is, frankly, the most, critical civilian weapon to defend. And we talked about the history where in World War II that, in fact, we had deployed so many troops that there was no real home defense left. And that, that was a real issue, became an issue after 9/11. We got all of the details about how America's rifle used America's rifle and how critical it was, and how even the AK was becoming like second cousin of America's rifle, that if you did not have your AR, the AK was what you should show up with in civil disturbance and unrest to defend yourself from a foreign invader, to defend yourself from a domestic invader. And, we have a judiciary that understands what we're talking about, that really gets this history, that knows that the reason we celebrate today with fireworks is because we chose to start shooting British people over these issues.
There it is. Gene, thank you so much for what you're doing. If people want to keep up with this, what's the best place to follow what's going on?
Firearms Policy Coalition, Firearms Policy Foundation, California Gun Rights Organization, my name has changed, and Second Amendment Foundation. Those are the places to go.
There you go. Gene Hoffman, thank you so much for what you do, and appreciate the great way you explain things. You have yourself a great Independence Day.
Thanks, Hal.